Story 1. A kidney stone is ironic because I once had my thumb come off. That did not hurt very much, mainly because I was in shock. Story 2. When I was 11, I had a ruptured appendix for 7 days. No one believed me and I nearly died. Story 3. I had a miscarriage when I was younger. The placenta would not detach and expel, so the emergency room doctor put his hand inside me and ripped it out. I swear it sounded like Velcro. It was the worst pain ever. I had 2 10-pound babies with no pain medication. Story 4. Childbirth was very bad. Sciatica was very bad. Recovering from surgery to remove my cancer was the worst. In my experience, the most recent pain always feels worst. Memory fades. Story 5. Childbirth after the epidural wore off. Sorry, Mom, we cannot give you any more. Story 6. Testicular torsion occurs when a testicle twists, cutting off its blood supply. Story 7. I had a missed miscarriage and had to take medication because I did not pass the fetus. I was told it would be like a heavy period with some cramps. Not even 30 minutes after taking it, I had the worst cramps I have ever experienced. They were so bad I was vomiting and lost so much blood that I had to go to the hospital because I passed out at home. I made it to the emergency room, but there was nothing they could do to help me. I had to sit in a hospital bed in agony until I finally passed it. I will never forget how that felt. Story 8. Shingles felt like my body was on fire, and the pain lasted for months. Years later, I have permanent nerve damage in my foot that feels like a pulsing electric shock. It was the worst. Story 9. This is probably nothing compared to what others have experienced, but I once touched a car cigarette lighter to my thumb. Some car models have an electric lighter you push in to heat a coil until it is red hot so you can light a cigarette. I did not realize how fast it heated. I accidentally pushed it in while playing with it and pulled it out immediately. In poor judgment, I stuck my left thumb into the lighter to see how hot it was, expecting only a little warmth. It was not. The coil became hot enough almost instantly to cause a severe burn that felt like the heat traveled from my thumb to my shoulder. Story 10. I woke up from a nap to make donuts on the new induction cooktop. I set the stove to the highest temperature. The donuts exploded while I was trying to remove them, causing second-degree oil burns across my hand, wrist, and part of my arm. Good Lord. Story 11. I have a very high pain tolerance. Cuts and a nail in my hand barely made me flinch. I had a cracked tooth for over a year with a bit of pain, but it was not too bad. Then I decided to get the tooth looked at. The dentist poked and prodded, asking if I felt anything. I kept saying no until he touched the exposed nerve. I could never have imagined such pain. I felt my face harden, and he took a step back. I felt so bad about giving him a death stare that I apologized profusely. I am not violent in any way and have never struck another person as an adult, but I wanted to punch him in the face for causing that pain. It was a primal urge from deep down, and it honestly scares me. Story 12. I broke my tailbone during childbirth. The baby weighed only 6.3 ounces and arrived 2 weeks early. Story 13. The only time I bent over in pain was from a kidney stone. It is an internal pain you cannot quite pinpoint, leaving you feeling helpless. Story 14. Cluster headaches. I had daily attacks for about 2 months after my mother died. It was the most intense pain I have ever felt, like something behind my left eye trying to push itself out through the socket. Traditional pain medications did not touch it. I went to an urgent care clinic to make sure I was not having a brain aneurysm, and they tried to give me OxyContin to ease the pain. It did absolutely nothing. I am thankfully in a cluster-free period now, but I cannot imagine how people with chronic cluster headaches get through their lives. They are called suicide headaches for a reason. I definitely contemplated it before I was able to find a treatment that worked because I endured 2 hours of the worst pain I had ever felt every day. I did not even want to wake up because I knew my daily attack would begin at 9 a.m. Story 15. I was told I had corneal erosion and that there was nothing to do but take non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. When I called a day later to ask if it was normal for the eye to be so red, ketorolac eye drops reduced the redness significantly within hours, so I do not know why they did not start with that. They could have prescribed a few days' worth of opioid painkillers, because it felt like a botched surgery the body did to itself. Story 16. I had a horse riding accident. My chin was torn half off and hanging from my face. A bone was torn out and an adult tooth was knocked out from the root, along with the surrounding bone. I could poke my tongue through my chin to the exposed bone of my mouth. I have no nerves in my chin anymore. They were all damaged in the accident. The pain was more than I can express. Story 17. I had migraines caused by fluid buildup in my skull. I also had severe pain behind my eyes and was rapidly losing my vision. I had experienced migraines randomly throughout my life before my diagnosis, and I would usually vomit from the pain. After that, the pain would typically subside. These were different. Vomiting made everything worse. The pain exceeded 10 on the pain scale and nothing helped. I was prescribed morphine and fentanyl patches, not together, and they did not help. I was on 60 milligrams of oxycodone 3 times a day, and that made life livable. I underwent 3 brain surgeries within a 5-month span, and now have a device implanted in my brain that pumps the excess fluid into my abdomen. Story 18. I have recurring bouts of trigeminal neuralgia. It is now almost controlled with carbamazepine, but I would rate the pain as equal to my 4-day labor with my son, perhaps worse. Story 19. 50 hours of back labor. The first 17 hours were unmedicated because I was inexperienced. I never had pain so intense that I could not help screaming. Story 20. I had surgery to remove a tumor from the first and second cervical vertebrae, followed by a laminectomy from the first to the fourth cervical vertebrae. The hospital's aftercare pain management was incorrect. They gave me Toradol instead of morphine. The pain was so severe that I began to hallucinate. Story 21. I was using a screw gun and putting all my weight into it to avoid stripping the screw. The bit slipped off and hit my thumbnail. Story 22. I had pneumonia that did not respond to antibiotics and then led to an empyema, a lung cavity filled with fluid and pus. This was already very uncomfortable for about a week before it was diagnosed. To treat it, they had to insert a large needle through my back and the pleural membrane to reach the cavity. The needle piercing the membrane was intensely painful. Story 23. I had a root canal treatment without proper anesthesia. The dentist could not reach the right area because of an abscess. I really hope the future brings a more sustainable alternative to teeth. Story 24. I was hit by a car while walking in a crosswalk. I have been in pain every day for nearly 30 years. I closed the door on many of my dreams. Story 25. My colon ruptured. I went into shock from the pain and died during emergency surgery but was revived. I will never forget the pain. I could not speak and could only scream. Story 26. I had a gallstone attack and pancreatitis. After dinner, I developed constant, stabbing abdominal pain that got progressively worse, and I kept vomiting even after there was nothing left to bring up. I assumed it was food poisoning from a food truck meal and that it would pass, but it did not. Early the next morning, my husband drove me to the hospital, where they started intravenous fluids to rehydrate me. As soon as I had fluids, I vomited them. I did not even know that could happen. I was on intravenous fluids for almost 48 hours before things calmed down enough, and I had surgery to remove my gallbladder. After not holding anything in my stomach for 3 days, I had a saltine cracker and diet ginger ale immediately after surgery. Tasted like a 5-star meal. Story 27. When I was 13, I kept wondering why my mouth would bleed randomly and why my molars had never fallen out. I went to the dentist and found out I had 7 adult molars growing into my baby molars. They had to pry each one out while I was awake with little anesthesia. An honorable mention. Around my 17th birthday, I developed a severe ingrown toenail that was not removed until I was 18. If I so much as lightly grazed it, the pain felt like my whole foot had been shot. The relief when they surgically removed it was incredible. Story 28. Childbirth, specifically back labor. Every part was painful, but I initially had 2 hours of back labor that felt like one long contraction. I could not move without pain. She must have flipped because suddenly my back stopped hurting, although the rest still hurt. I remember crying and saying, I thought you were supposed to get a break between contractions. Another memorable pain was a cortisone injection in my big toe joint that I would rate 9 out of 10. I saw a bright flash like lightning and screamed in the office because I did not expect it to hurt so much. My joint had already been swollen from turf toe. Story 29. Last year I had a severe case of sciatica. It was so painful that I could not even put on my shoes. Story 30. I had an elective tonsillectomy at age 22. It hurt to breathe, let alone eat or drink. That lasted 2 weeks, and I was miserable. Story 31. The skin around one of my fingernails became infected. I am a nail biter, and it became so swollen that the tip of my finger practically doubled in size. It hurt so badly that the pain actually woke me up one morning, and I decided right then that I needed to go to the doctor first thing. As I was leaving the house, I went to pick up my keys, but I was not paying enough attention and my hand missed the key bowl. My swollen finger caught the tip of a pencil that was lying next to it. I had never yelled in pain before in my life, but that time I did. The noise that came out of me was primeval. I genuinely felt sick and dizzy. The pain I felt later, from the nurse stabbing and squeezing it to get the pus out, was nothing compared to what I felt earlier. Story 32. I have been bitten in the testicles by a German Shepherd, broken my penis twice, broken my hand punching a wall, been punched in the testicles, broken bones in my shoulder, and had a hip replacement. One time I had a head cold, and I am a man. Story 33. I was induced, and the epidural did not work. I started labor around 7 a.m. and finally delivered at 4 p.m. My baby was in the 99th percentile for head size, so I had an extensive episiotomy and a tear that extended to the anus. I could not sit properly for almost 3 months afterward. Yes, I have an only child. I believe all mothers are incredible. Many have had even harder deliveries than mine. Story 34. Tough call. Open heart surgery, 10 days of severe appendicitis, or burns requiring skin grafts on both arms. Story 35. I underwent multiple unsuccessful lumbar puncture attempts before a single successful one. During a lumbar puncture, a long needle is inserted between 2 vertebrae in the lower back to access the space around the spinal cord by passing through the dura and to collect a sample of cerebrospinal fluid. In an unsuccessful attempt, the needle is inserted but no sample is obtained because the needle undershoots or overshoots the target. Local anesthetic is usually given, but it is sometimes ineffective. In my case, it was ineffective despite 4 injections of local anesthetic. After the local injections, the large needle was inserted multiple times between my vertebrae into the subarachnoid space, the space that contains the cerebrospinal fluid. The pain was unbearable. I nearly passed out from the pain, which I would rate close to 10 on the pain scale, with 10 indicating loss of consciousness. I mostly remember pain down my left leg and being told that this could indicate they irritated or hit a spinal nerve, which was terrifying. Following the final successful attempt, I developed a cerebrospinal fluid leak that took several weeks to resolve and left me with low cerebrospinal fluid pressure headaches. It has been 9 years and I still cannot lie in the position used during the procedure because it makes me extremely anxious. I have refused diagnostic lumbar punctures since and hope never to have another. Story 36. I developed testicular torsion after attempting to lift something I should not have. Always ask for help. Story 37. Total knee replacement, childbirth, and lumbar fusion are all neck and neck. Story 38. The kneecap dislocated, was taped for the next game, and dislocated again. This time it could not slide back because the tape was in the way. It remained dislocated until the tape was cut off and the kneecap could be repositioned. Story 39. I went through a 36-hour labor without pain relief. I cannot really remember why, to be honest. I will not do it again, whether medicated or unmedicated. Story 40. Kidney stones by a long shot. I wasn't feeling well all morning and decided to close shop and go home. I made it to my driveway and started stepping out of my car. Then I fell right into the middle of a mud puddle, curled up in the fetal position, and started screaming at the top of my lungs. Part physical pain, part panic, because I had no idea what was going on. Story 41. I dislocated my kneecap twice. The second time, Paramedics sedated me heavily with fentanyl. One of them told me not to be scared. The fentanyl high was the scariest moment of my life. Never again. Story 42. I went riding on an all-terrain cycle along the dry river bottom in Arizona. While moving through the low thickets, branches whipped me and I was slapped in the face. Without protective gear, I tore the corneas of both eyes. The pain was excruciating. I had to use duct tape to secure a pillow over my eyes to go to the emergency room because any light caused severe pain. Story 43. I suffered a shattered knee and lower leg 100 miles offshore. Took 18 hours to reach the hospital. Story 44. I had a natural childbirth. The contractions from 8 to 10 centimeters were the worst. Up until then I was fine. I also had a shoulder dystocia, which I am sure did not feel good based on the muscle pain and bruising I experienced, but I cannot remember it. Story 45. I had a ruptured ovarian cyst. I woke up in the middle of the night, vomited in the bathroom, and then lay on the bathroom floor, curled into a ball for hours, too much in pain to get up. I did not know what it was and thought I had a stomach bug. I went to the doctor a few days later and was told the cyst had ruptured. They said I was lucky it did not cause a worse problem or an infection. I was so ill and in severe pain that I could not work for a week and could not keep food down for longer. Story 46. Delivering a baby is first. Scratching of corneas comes second. Story 47. Severe gas pains. Near third-degree burns. Broken bones and strained or torn muscles and ligaments. Worst of all were days of intense grief during early attachment healing. I told my psychologist at the time, I would rather be beaten by a mob with iron bars than endure the abuse of my ex-wife. I did not realize the extent and form of my own narcissism, or that I was also bearing the burden of collective shame without knowing it. Being an unconscious container for everyone's disowned shadow projections hurts deeply. Story 48. Using a mandolin, I sliced a good portion of my fingertip off. There was no point in going to the hospital, so I heated a spoon with a propane torch and cauterized it. It was sheer pain. I had never experienced that nerve-tingling jolt throughout my body. It healed fine, and I have almost recovered my fingerprint. It's been a few years. Story 49. I had a tube in my knee to drain the blood because it was so swollen I could not bend my knee anymore. Once it had mostly healed, the doctor grabbed the tube with her two small hands and pulled it out of my kneecap. I really thought half my flesh came with it. Story 50. I had an infected tooth that became a sinus infection and then pink eye. My husband had kidney stones. Story 51. I broke my foot while trail running. The return trip was 1.5 miles and not fun. Story 52. I remember being so sick and stuffed up that I felt a terrible, overwhelming pressure in my head. I was crying and could do nothing but lie down in agony. Finally, the pressure released and the relief was immediate. Story 53. I'm an announcer for my local independent professional wrestling scene. There is a tag team of African-American gentlemen who go by Not Gonna Ask. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that stands for Not Gonna Ask, but they want me to pronounce it phonetically like the slur. I refused to do so. They chased me out of the ring. It's a good bit. I had a project coming up that was going to keep me away from wrestling for about 8 weeks, so we worked it out that at my last show before the break, Not Gonna Ask would finally snap and do something physical to me. What we did was a double choke slam from the ring apron through a table onto the floor, which was just a rubber mat over concrete. Felt like I was hit by a goddamn comet. I had no injuries, but the next day all I could do was lie around. That's the only bump like that I have in me. I'm officially retired from doing that kind of stupid stunt anymore. There is a video on my profile. Story 54. Somehow, a kidney stone hurt more than when I tore the lateral collateral ligament and the medial collateral ligament during a football game on artificial turf. Story 55. 3 years ago, I ruptured my anterior cruciate ligament and tore a meniscus in a ski accident. It felt like a painful electric shock, similar to hitting your elbow, but 1,000 times stronger. Afterwards, I could not stand without using my skis as crutches and had to climb for an hour to reach the cable car. I finally had surgery to fix it all a couple of months ago. Story 56. I had steroid injections to treat keloid scar tissue on my shoulders and back. I am not really afraid of needles or vaccines, but the burning was absolutely awful. They did not work. I developed more keloids on both shoulders, my chest, and my back. Story 57. My daughter had a kidney stone. She said she would rather die than endure that pain again. The worst pain I ever had was sciatica. It ran from my hip down the back of my leg to my knee. If I stretched my leg to stand on it, it felt like someone had lit a match in my thigh. I had never felt pain like that. I had to keep my leg bent for months and use a crutch. Story 58. I walked into a glass door. I wish I were kidding, but I am grateful that it is the worst pain I have experienced. Laughing out loud. Story 59. I've had a lot of pain since my trigeminal neuralgia, but nothing is severe. Reminding myself that the pain was still not as bad as trigeminal neuralgia is what got me through childbirth. Story 60. I had a tooth abscess and needed an extraction. I was delirious with pain and screaming incoherently. Story 61. I severed a nerve in my arm during a blood donation. It felt like my whole arm had been dipped in molten steel. Everything went in slow motion. I thought I was going to pass out and was instantly drenched in sweat. I still have a numb patch on my arm, but I did not lose any functionality or strength. I do not recommend it. Story 62. It's a toss-up between the pain of having precancerous cells removed from my cervix and having my tubes tied at the same time, and the pain of my boyfriend being clumsy and landing on the inside of my right knee. Both were extremely painful. Story 63. Intrauterine device insertion with no pain medication or numbing. The doctor said you will just feel a pinch, and I blacked out on the table. My elbow tattoo took 3 hours, but that pales in comparison to my first intrauterine device. Story 64. I passed a large kidney stone, and it felt like I was being sawed in half. Story 65. I had a urethrotomy. No amount of morphine dulled the pain. Story 66. I thought the worst pain was when 2 doctors aligned my broken wrist by pulling at opposite ends of my arm without anesthetic. Then I had a breast reduction, and having stitches removed from my nipples was pure torture. Story 67. Some of these memories are so intense that they make me feel embarrassed. Mine was the recovery after my tonsillectomy. I was 16 or 17, and the pain was unreal. They gave me liquid hydrocodone, but it did not start to work until halfway through the recovery. I was taking the hydrocodone and following it with a large amount of ibuprofen. I did not want to eat or do anything. I missed the first 2 weeks of my junior year because all I could do was sleep and cry. Story 68. Getting an intrauterine device inserted and experiencing months of cramps afterward. Apparently, it is nothing compared to childbirth, though. Story 69. A severed tendon felt worse than childbirth, broken bones, and other injuries. I am a caregiver to my adult son and accidentally cut a tendon one night while cooking. I vomited, stopped the bleeding, and wrapped the wound because I had to continue caregiving. I was also scheduled for abdominal surgery the next morning, so I put the injury out of my mind. I did not know I had cut a tendon, so I wrapped it and ignored it. That was a bad idea. The following week, I fully ruptured the tendon and had to return for surgery to reattach it. Back-to-back surgeries were not fun. To this day, the injury is not fully healed and hurts daily. I never regained full function. Severed tendons are serious and difficult to recover from, requiring extensive physical therapy. Story 70. Kidney stone. I received a running kick to the testicles. I would take 5 of those before I had another kidney stone. Over 2 days, I experienced multiple bouts of unimaginable pain that lasted 2 to 4 hours before I finally went to the hospital. Passing the stone was not as bad as the agony of it moving toward my bladder. Story 71. I was lucky not to have anything too serious, but I threw my back out. It hurt a lot. I thought I had broken my spine. Story 72. My knee dislocated and then immediately relocated. The best part is that it happened while I was working as a server near a group of customers. Story 73. Subarachnoid brain hemorrhage. It felt like someone had slammed me in the back of the head with a hammer. I spent 2 days on morphine and 3 weeks on opioid medication. Story 74. I have given birth 4 times without medications. It was not by choice because the births came quickly. The worst pain I have ever experienced was an attack of pancreatitis. Story 75. I broke my fingers and had 2 pins surgically inserted into the bones of each finger to straighten them. They were not permanent and protruded through my skin. After 2 months, the doctor removed the pins without any anesthesia. It was excruciatingly painful. I would have preferred breaking all my fingers again. Story 76. I had my hymen lasered without numbing or anesthetic. Experienced 2 miscarriages within 10 days. Received lidocaine injections in my forehead, and had a steroid injection into the arch of my foot through the sole. Story 77. It is a toss-up between endometriosis, gallstones, and optic neuritis. Story 78. Top 4. 1. When I was 12, my small intestine ruptured during a bicycle accident. My father did not believe I needed the hospital. I was in and out of consciousness for 5 hours before reaching the emergency department. The doctor berated him. I was developing sepsis and was rushed into emergency exploratory surgery to locate the leak. 2. I experienced severe eye pain after the nerve block for retinal repair surgery wore off. 3. A blocked gallbladder. 4. Contractions toward the end of labor. Delivery was a breeze. Story 79. When I got my braces off, the dentist was chiseling and pushing on my teeth. They felt like they were going to pop out. By the time the dentist finished, I was tearing up. Story 80. After birthing my stillborn daughter, I was rushed to the operating theater so they could stop the bleeding. They inserted a balloon device to apply pressure inside and try to stop it. The balloon stopped the bleeding after I lost almost 2 liters, so I was able to keep my uterus. The agony from the device as my pain medication wore off and being immobilized was awful. Part of me broke. I had to shut down mentally to cope with the situation and the pain. I was later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I am recovering mentally and have a great therapist. Physically, I am okay now too. Story 81. I had a large ovarian cyst that burst. I had been on a 6-month waiting list for a specialist referral because of incapacitating cramping. I had a scan to confirm, but doctors dismissed my concerns for months, saying it would not cause problems. I was vomiting and thought I would faint from the pain. I later learned you should go to accident and emergency if you suspect this is happening. I did not, because my doctor had gaslighted me for so long that I carried on with my life. At my specialist appointment and scan, they said the cyst had resolved and no further treatment was needed. This is another example of how women's health problems are often swept under the rug. Story 82. Natural childbirth was nothing compared with my tooth pain and pneumonia. Story 83. When I realized that everyone I loved was using me. Story 84. A kidney stone and the time I dislocated my shoulder are tied. My arm still hurts occasionally. In a taekwondo match, do not try to block kicks. Story 85. I have major jaw pain from multiple broken teeth. I have had a cesarean section. Story 86. One of the worst things I had to go through was a very large bowel movement due to high amounts of ibuprofen. I have not taken ibuprofen since then. Story 87. Shoulder replacement surgery was the most difficult of my surgeries. I have had several back surgeries, but the shoulder replacement was the hardest. Postoperative pain management was lacking. Story 88. Being cut open around for already broken ribs so a chest tube could be inserted to repair my collapsed lung. Story 89. I broke my big toe in several places. I couldn't sleep for a week. I had to keep my whole leg elevated because whenever it was below my heart, I felt a pulsing pain. It was excruciating. I have had many other medical problems that caused severe pain, but none compared to that break. Story 90. I cut my index finger on my meat slicer. When I went to the urgent care clinic, they cleaned it and injected lidocaine into the tip of my finger. The first 2 injections were the worst pain I had ever felt. I did not feel the third one. It had numbed by then. As I left after they stitched it up, I started laughing hysterically. I called a friend, and he said I was in shock. My mother said kidney stones were more painful than childbirth. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.